Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Robert McDowall, and we're going to take a look at the effects of the COVID pandemic. Robert, good to see you as ever.
Good afternoon, Tony, and good to see you as well after.
Thank you very much for sparing me some time. Now,
Pleasure.
It's quite interesting, having done a little bit of research. George W. Bush read a book in 2005 about Spanish flu, said something must be done, and nothing ever was done.
Well, that is broadly true. I think a number of government organizations did put together what I call manuals. But like a lot of manuals, they're diligently put together and figuratively put on the shelf or put in archives and gather dust or remain in the archives. Yeah. So whatever was done was really an academic exercise at best, Tony.
Yeah, so there we are. So, but we had warning.
Yeah.
What about the origin? What's your theory? Was it the market, the one man buying a duff piece of meat, or could it have been an accidental escape from the local laboratory?
Well, I will be a wimp and say probably both. We really don't know, and I doubt if we ever really will know. But I actually find it rather difficult to believe that one bad piece of meat or bad chicken or whatever could cause a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah, I agree. It does seem a bit, strange.
Yeah,
and
but we won't. We will never really know.
No, so we'll have these two theories floating around forever and ever.
That's right, and books and academic papers and theses will be written on it. And I don't think the Chinese have a sort of national archive which they release after 15 or 20 years. So I think
ex-millennium.
Exactly. So I think we will continue to speculate, Tony.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Now, of course, when it hit Italy, the sort of warning bells began to sound. And then, of course, it suddenly got to the UK. There was quite a bit of initial panic. Neil Ferguson was prophesying deaths in excess of 500,000 people. And, one really feels that I suppose you have to say something, don't you?
Well, I think in situations like this, I think it's better to present what I say the worst case scenario. It may not be good for morale, but I think at least it shows you're trying to be realistic with people. Of course, it was an exaggeration, 500,000, but such is the environment. And I think equally the number of deaths, 150,000 or so in the UK, which allegedly derived from COVID, it is a maximum. It's any death which occurred within 28 days of someone having tested positive for COVID. And of course, there's all sorts of other symptoms, underlying reasons why that should happen. So the 150 is an absolute maximum. It is less. How many directly were from COVID? I don't think we'll ever know.
No. But it always seemed to me to be a funny way of actually trying to make the statistic work.
Yeah. I think the only thing it did do, it didn't present an underestimate of the deaths. I think that would have been a big kind of political and morale issue to deal with if that had been the case. So not the best way, but I suppose they were looking to manage expectations.
Yeah, I guess so. But of course, the great piece of news and the great achievement was the speed of the vaccine research and the production of it. I mean, that's unheard of, isn't it?
Well, I almost akin it to sort of wartime production, if you like. All hands to the pump, all resources focused on this, and it's amazing what can be done because normally research, production, validations of drugs and medicine takes 5 to 10 years, which is why they have to be very large companies with very deep pockets to introduce new drugs and medicine. But this was done with all hands to the pump, real focus, and it shows what can be done in extremities, wartime type extremities, Tony.
And of course, Robert, we're coming up to the end of January as we have this interview. It's only just over a year ago that the first vaccines were administered. And to have these sort of numbers that have been vaccinated is incredible to my mind.
Yes, I mean, it was actually, despite a number of hiccups, that's been phenomenally well organized and managed. But maybe at the expense of some other aspects of the health service.
Yeah.
But it was managed very well. But the full credit will probably never be given, unfortunately.
I'm very proud of the fact that it was Oxford and AstraZeneca that set the ball rolling. I can't quite understand why the European Union had the attitude towards AstraZeneca that it did. I think it was slightly Brexit inspired, and possibly you'd go along on that one.
I certainly would. It was as you say, almost this time last year, the first bitterness of Brexit was being expressed, and I'm afraid the head of the European Union rather picked up the baton on that and then dropped it rather violently.
Yeah.
Not very smart, and I think it certainly didn't help the credibility of the EU in terms of bringing resources together for a worldwide issue. I'd also say the same about the current Ukraine thing, but we won't drift into that.
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment.
Foreign policy comes later on in the year.
Absolutely.
Foreign policy will be later.
My apologies.
But I think that it seemed that they were looking for every reason to put AstraZeneca down. And, let's remember that AstraZeneca produced the vaccine at cost price, whereas a lot of the other big farmers have made a packet out of it, haven't they?
They have indeed. And that is when medical and drugs enterprises are not nationalized or form part of a command economy, that's inevitably going to be the case, rightly or wrongly. I mean, it was the same during the last two wars when private enterprises produced munitions, aircraft, and so on. Some of them made a lot of money out of it. And that's a sort of dilemma. Do you kind of have a command economy? Do you nationalize these enterprises? Unfortunately, I don't think it's there's much chance in appearing to their better nature.
No, I guess they're in it for the buck, aren't they? Really, and
that's right.
I suppose that's the point. It was just really sorry.
Yeah.
It was just really the comparison between AZ and the rest of them.
Yeah. I can only assume AZ managed its shareholders much better than perhaps some of the other international pharmaceutical organizations.
Yeah. Of course, we inevitably saw failures from the point of view of the PPE. We saw China presumably making quite a bit of money out of supplying the PPE, which is rather ironical. I suppose politicians, governments, if they're sort of got their back to the wall, they've got to really sort of come in and say, well, we've got to get PPE as quickly as we can from wherever.
That's right. Unfortunately, these are some of the sort of political imperatives, and whether China's profiteering now with its own rather strict lockdowns in a number of provinces is perhaps it's coming back to bite them.
Yeah, I think you could be right there as far as that's concerned. What I found rather strange in the whole business as far as the UK was concerned is the fact that you've got the four different governments all doing slightly different things, life getting thoroughly confusing. And you really wonder, despite the fact they've got their devolved powers, should there be a federal setup for this sort of thing?
Well, well, I think if there were more moves towards independence, that would certainly be necessary. Certainly in the context of Scotland and Northern Ireland, there was a bit of what I call political grandstanding or posturing to have nuanced differences. But I suppose also, you see, Scotland has not a great health record. I mean, despite its sort of wonderful meat, fruit, vegetables, and so on, the people's mortality is not as long as the rest of the world. So, you know, they could defend it, but I do think there wasn't actually enough pulling together in terms of managing some of the details of the pandemic.
And presumably the devolution agreements that apply to each one hasn't got the material within it to deal with this sort of situation. I mean, what would happen if we declared war on somebody?
Well, that at the moment, defence is a centralised competency, if I can use that term, and Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland would be part of it.
Yeah.
And if the UK, if they wanted to, let's say, put additional naval bases or runways or something in Scotland or Wales, the government could certainly do that and override any local objection.
And that would be coming from Westminster.
That would be coming from Westminster.
Yeah, so
defence is not a devolved power, and I don't think ever would be. Although it would be very interesting what would happen in the context of Scotland if it did achieve independence. It would it wants to move such nuclear installations as there are out of Scotland, but I think that would be a very difficult one, which candidly the Scottish government hasn't even contemplated.
Yeah, and that would result in a lot of job losses, wouldn't it?
An enormous number of job losses, and I don't think those job losses could be sustained from what would be a weaker economy anyway.
So hopefully we're in a situation where a pandemic is returning to be an epidemic. What do you see from that point of view? I mean, neither of us are medical men, but you know, if you look at graphs, it would appear that the Omicron is a quick spreader and a fairly quick recoverer.
Yes, I mean, what we're doing is moving to a herd situation where people are vaccinated and or have a level of immunity, and one would expect that it would be like a flu variant. Whether we need additional ingredient in the annual flu jab or not, I can't tell, but it will come around to being a sort of annual flu type of scare.
Yeah,
the sooner the better, in my view. But
yeah, I couldn't agree more from that point of view. So we've just got to accept the fact that we've got to live with it.
We've got to live with it. We can't bunker down forever. People can take their own more forceful remedies, so isolation and so on. But you know, those have other consequences, which I think some people are living with and will continue to live with as we move to an endemic phase.
Yeah, very much so. COVID and inflation. We're up to 5% plus in the UK on inflation. I see Guernsey's coming at about 4.4 or something.
Yeah.
Is there a direct correlation?
No. The correlation is much more with energy and fuel, actually. Obviously, things like greater demand for labour, with consequence pay rise, more demand for fewer goods or services. These do fuel inflation. But the real thing at the moment is is energy, and I'm afraid if the current geopolitical environment continues, we will certainly stay at above 5% for way beyond this year. And so I think it's the impact of fuel, so that's heating, lighting, transport, and those goods and services which rely on transport, which are going to be most impacted.
Given the fact Germany is very reliant on Russian gas, they're in a bit of an embarrassing situation at the present time, aren't they, as far as Ukraine's concerned?
They are, and it was interesting. I was listening to the news at lunchtime, where there were, dare I say, a number of apologists on for Germany saying why they could only give limited support to any action taken against Russia, both because of their quote neutrality background since the war, but also because of the energy. They are very, very vulnerable, more vulnerable than most other countries within the EU. So I'm afraid that I think the energy issue is and the defense are showing some cracks in what you might loosely call EU unity.
Yeah, of course, Germany made the mistake of getting rid of its nuclear facilities. Can't understand why.
Well, I think that was also pandering to the Green Party.
Yeah.
And of course, there is now the Greens are in the coalition. I think it was a mistake, and one that I suggest they will regret before too long.
Yeah, yeah. Coming back to the UK and inflation, the triple lock on the old age pensions, is that busted forever?
Well, I think from a voter point of view, it's going to be quite disastrous if the government, reneges materially, and particularly as we've got growing inflation.
Yeah,
that will not help some of their core vote. Let's put it like that. Now, what the solution is, I suggest, would be that the retirement age, which is moving up to 68, may even move to 70, and that they will bring that nearer. And that's probably politically the least harmful way of doing it, because it passes it on to another generation of politicians to address. But maybe I'm being cynical, Terry.
Never. but the fact of the matter is that the Conservative government got a lot of votes from people of our age or our age plus.
Yep.
And
Right.
There was a sort of compact there that the triple lock could never be broken.
Exactly, and it's been sustained for quite a long time. So I think they've got to go very, very easy on the reduction in the triple lock. And as I say, I think the only way out of it is to increase the pensionable age to 70 and draw in more closely the retirement age of 68.
Yeah.
But that is not going to be popular with what we might call younger people.
No, quite. just to remind our friends that are watching this, the triple lock consisted of a minimum of 2.5%.
Correct.
A close correlation with the earnings index.
Yes, that's right.
What was the third element?
And the third element was to do with what was it? I can't remember what the third element was myself.
I've lost it as well.
There was a third element.
Was it RPI?
It probably it was, and there was a move to change that to the CPI, which is normally a little bit low. But yes, you're right. It's the RPI, and of course, the indices are going to be way above 2.5%. this year. Probably 5-6%.
Yeah. You can see that happening, can't you?
Exactly.
The other worry, of course, is under the Cameron government, with George in charge of the finances. We went through years of austerity.
Yeah.
And that's gone down the tubes totally, hasn't it?
We threw it to the wind. Now it would be very difficult to do otherwise in what I call a quasi-war situation, Tony. But the government has racked up, well, it'll be between 450 and 500 billion, the direct and indirect costs of funding COVID.
So there you are. That's the cost of it. How do you structure the debt?
Well, and I think this will happen, particularly because of the tax pressures, and so, which I think will have to be restrained. I think they will have to structure that 450, 500 billion as long-term debt, which will be paid off if as and when, rather like war loan.
Yeah.
Whether it will be one bond, two bonds, or three bonds, maybe there may be one, for example, for recovery of the National Health Service. But whatever it is, I think that the debt will have to be paid off over 40 or 50 years, maybe sooner if there's a big bout of prosperity. But what they will also have to do is they will have to add a very attractive coupon to those bonds to get people to subscribe over and above the normal sort of institutional subscription. But I think that's what they've got to do, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some announcements of that nature this year. I'd say particularly if they withdraw the national NHI increases and some of the other tax increases which have been preluded.
Yeah, because basically war loan didn't have a redemption date, did it?
It
bit like consoles.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've had this conversation before, but before the beginning of the 20th century, all government bonds were undated.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think they will have to be undated, rather like war loan. And again, forgive my cynicism, inflation will erode the value of those the debt under those bonds.
Well, isn't this what they say about government? You can inflate yourself out of financial deficits.
You can, and even if you took 2.5% a year, by the time you compound that, after 30 years or so, the debt's pretty well eroded.
Yeah.
But I don't want to muddy their prospective approach on, but certainly will have to be packaged up long term, because there is no way that the economy or earners can meet those commitments, and even the government's own supporters are now saying that.
I found it quite interesting looking at world stock markets, how the markets reacted each time there was a variant on the COVID virus coming through, with a big dip, followed by a fairly healthy return. And, at the present time, the FTSE 100 is not that far short of its all-time high.
No, it isn't. And one of the interesting things about that is the FTSE 100 has quite a strong element of what I call oils, carbon, aggregates, mining in it, and they have sustained much better than perhaps some of the more ethical stocks, and they're going to be there for a while, because I think whatever the moves are to decarbonisation, new energy sources, they've got to be very carefully calibrated. You can't just shut down the mines or the oil fields or anything like that. It's totally unrealistic.
Would you agree that at the present time, governments on a global basis aren't really taking on board the additional expenditure for decarbonisation. I mean, for example, the national grid in the UK presumably is going to be inadequate in terms of its capacity if we're driving electric cars and heating our houses with electricity.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. So, they put these targets and headlines there, and what is needed is both international and, more importantly, national plans as how they're going to get there. Need the detail is so important. So, for example, there's no point in having lots of electric cars without enough charging points. There is no point in shutting off gas boilers if others aren't available. Sheer madness. So the devil is in the detail, and it needs to be very carefully calibrated.
Yeah, and quite honestly, some of the targets being set in terms of time, 2030, no more internal combustion engine vehicles. I really think that's pushing it a bit.
Well, yes, and there needs to be some rationale, or, if you like, preamble to why they have set 2030 or 2035, and what will be involved in that. These are just crowd-pleasing headlines, frankly.
Yeah.
No more than that.
Yeah. And it seems to me that as the world heats up, you get to this tipping point, and after you get to the tipping point, there's nothing much you can do. It's all very well to say, oh, we're going to continue with decarbonisation, but it probably isn't going to make a blind bit of difference.
Exactly. So, I'm a little fatalistic about this. All right, I may not be around to see the worst.
Me neither.
But we agree on that, Tony.
We do indeed.
And there may be some very harsh times ahead, and perhaps if we reach a real tipping point with material health consequences, then we may be put on that sort of quasi-war footing as we were during the COVID crisis. Another all hands to the pump. But that's not very satisfactory. It's disruptive. It reduces morale, etc. So they do need a horrible word, but a national plan as to how they're going to achieve these.
Yeah, and that is most important. Quite interesting, Robert, at the moment that we've got relatively low unemployment and lots of jobs available. I don't quite understand that one.
Well, I think there are two or three reasons. One is, of course, some people have made what I guess you call lifestyle choices of opting out off the career ladder. Working from home enables them to do other things. They've reassessed their quality lifestyle and so on. That's one thing. Secondly, clearly there have been restrictions on people coming to the UK and taking up employment, particularly at the less skilled level, and then thirdly, there is competition for skills, be they financial services, technology, research and engineering, all around the world, and employers have to compete and offer higher salaries and incentives. Although I do notice that apparently as part of an agreement that we're coming to or have come to with India, is that we would allow many more people with skills from India, particularly I'm talking particularly on the IT side, to come in and work in the UK on what I call more easier terms than perhaps the standard visa terms that exist for third countries.
And presumably that would also work for doctors in the medical profession.
Yes, fast tracking. Absolutely, where there are real skills which would have kind of national impact, huge national impact if they're not satisfied. Then yes, they'll bring down the barriers. But India does seem to be a a place from which we can get people. And also the other interesting thing is that outsourcing or offshoring, or however you like to describe it, is not as fashionable as it is. So there's certainly been a plateauing of technology jobs in India, if not a slight decrease. So this is, as the work comes this way, then some people from India will follow.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, just to finalise this chat, how do you see Britain's position in the world in terms of the recovery after COVID?
Well, it certainly does appear to be ahead, both in terms of forecasting of growth and perhaps in terms of returning to pre-COVID environment. But I am slightly worried about how the commitment that the UK may make towards Ukraine. I hope it's more, yes, you've got to make a stand, but we mustn't get dragged into Ukraine and certainly possibly destroy economic opportunities with what I call either the East or the Orient.
Yeah, because the fact of the matter is that if you offend Russia, you may offend China as well.
Absolutely. So but by all means, do add your protest back, but don't get sucked in there as one was in Afghanistan. So not that I think that is likely to happen.
No. But something they should be aware of.
They should be aware of. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Robert, thanks so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
many thanks. We'll no doubt see you later on in the year. And meantime, take care.
Thanks a lot then, Tony. Really enjoyed it. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.